Good evening and welcome to the AZAPO online political education platform. My name is Simpuya Ashe. Today is the 44th anniversary of the October 19, the Black Solidarity Day, and some know it as the Black Wednesday. This is the day upon which a banning order was declared on 16 organizations, of which 14 were of Black consciousness movement, including 2 newspapers and a Christian journal. And this gave rise to the normative reference of 19 Black consciousness organizations that were banned on this day, October 19, 1977. These BC organizations reflected a representation of the different sectors of our country under the banner of Black consciousness. And this really epitomized the unity of Black people in their effort to advance the cause of our struggle. I invite you today to reflect on this day, on this 44th anniversary of the Black Solidarity Day. We dedicate this 44th anniversary to reflections on Black consciousness and its drive for Black solidarity, its history, and its role in fostering the solidarity of Black people that helped to catalyze the struggle effort in addressing the psychosocial and economic issues still facing our people today. The Black consciousness movement and the Black consciousness philosophy played a huge role in shaping the media narrative. And conversely, the media helped a great deal in elevating the message and the narrative and the philosophy of Black consciousness through the populace of our country. I welcome this evening comrades who are not new to this movement. Sis Pearl Lutuli is a stalwart of the Black consciousness movement. She was a student at Morris Isaacson, along with the president of AZAPO, back at the formative years of Black consciousness. Sis Pearl Lutuli is a former journalist. She is an editor. She is a publisher and a media business executive. She was a journalist with the World newspaper on October 1977. Along with her is the president of the Azanian People's Organization, Comrade Strike Tukwan, who needs no introduction to his own organization. Welcome, comrades, to this platform. It is great to have you this evening. We are going to be spending the next 1.5 hours reflecting on Black consciousness and reflecting on this day and its contribution to the history that we now know. I'm going to be asking Sis Pearl first to share her own reflections of what she has experienced, what she has seen, and what she has lived on October 19, and her reflections of the day today. Sis Pearl.
Thank you, comrade. Over the years, October 19 has been commemorated as a media day in South Africa, purely because amongst the 17 organizations that got burned by the apartheid government were the two major newspapers, The World and Weekend World, and of course, a Christian journal. What fell through the cracks in the years is the fact that 14 other diverse organizations got banned. These represented women, students, youth, community, education, political, professional, and Christian formations. 70 political and community leaders and a few journalists got detained and others banned. These BC organizations reflected a different groups and sectors of our country under the banner of Black consciousness movement. Sorry, my computer it's sleeping. But more than anything, they epitomize the solidarity of Black people at the time in their effort to advance the cause of the struggle. So in my humble opinion, October 19th could not and should not be about just the media or Black journalism, but it should be remembered as a day when apartheid government cracked down on the Black consciousness movement, a very sad day in the history of our country and the Black consciousness movement. For common among the diverse organizations that got banned and the 70 leaders that were arrested and banned was the Black consciousness philosophy. Every one of the organizations, including UBJ or Union of Black Journalists, were part and parcel of the Black consciousness movement. We cannot ever talk about a Black Wednesday without fully comprehending the context of the Black consciousness movement and the atmosphere in the country then. October 19, 1977, the fires of June 16 were still burning. In fact, the whole country was experiencing a political turmoil. Political awareness in the country was at a high. Steve Biko, the man who led the Black consciousness movement, had been killed in September. Many young people were skipping the country to go into exile, while some were detained without trial. and the anger and the hatred for the repressive apartheid regime were palpable. What the Black consciousness philosophy had managed to do was to create a positive and solidifying attitude amongst us. We belong to various and diverse community, political, professional, Christian, and women's formations, but we were brothers and sisters in the struggle against apartheid. It taught us to be proud of who we are. We were Black and proud. We learned to value our potential and value ourselves as Black people. It taught us and showed us the need for unity and for Black people to work together for a holistic liberation. This attitude permeated in all sectors of our society, even in journalism. Our role as Black journalists was to write about these events and showcase those in our society that were making a difference in our communities, while sadly perpetuating the notion of self-awareness and self-worth. I must say, writing about Black scandals or the trashy kind of journalism was a no-no then. That does not mean there were no scandals, but the philosophy of BC taught us to be part of building rather than destroying individuals, our families, and our communities. Leadership in this organization was about sacrifice rather than self-aggrandizement. It was a sacrifice because no one was paid, and most ended up detained or banished for being part of these organizations. Leaders were committed to changing the cause of Black people in the country. They were honestly committed to changing the lives of the people. Steve Biko and Mampila Rampela, who were the leaders or part of the leadership of the Black consciousness movement, led by example. They started various community upliftment projects which showed the rest of us the importance of community involvement and teaching people to learn to be self-reliant. Through the Black Community Program, a number of local women were helped to grow and maintain their own vegetable gardens. As journalists of the day, we were first Black before we were journalists. Everything our people went through, we also went through. Therefore, our commitment was to the people's struggle. I remember when 28 of us ended up in jail after we were arrested for an illegal protest march. Our editor at The World, or at, it was Post, because it was after the banning of The World and Weekend World. Our editor, Percy Koboza, and several journalists had been detained without trial for days on end when we, as MWASA, which was the Media Workers Association of South Africa, which had replaced UBJ, we decided to go on the protest march. While we had journalists from other newspapers as part of the march, most of us were from the Post, which meant there was no newspaper on the streets the next day because the journalists were in jail. Our employer had to pay bail for us because we were not prepared to plead or to even pay that bail. But we were given a tongue lashing by our white acting editor when we returned to work. He called us young and headstrong in his editorial, which we were very angry about. And we made him understand that while we appreciated our jobs, our lives and the welfare of our families came first. Going on that march was a huge gamble on our lives at that period because we could have been shot on sight by the police who had had enough of us or we could have been detained for a long time. In conclusion, I dare say, looking at what is going on in our democracy 25 years on, we need the Black consciousness philosophy and ideology more than ever before. With the advent of the new democracy, people seem to have handed over their plight to the ANC government. Those that want to participate in government seem to be doing so because it is a way of earning a salary or making money from the many government tenders. It is no longer about the good of the people. The democracy that we all worked on so hard to achieve is now about a few. White bureaucracy has been replaced by Black bureaucracy. I am sure Steve Biko is turning in his grave when he sees us being passive spectators in the course of our history. We have failed Steve Biko's vision, which, quote, unquote, of bestowing upon South Africa the greatest gift possible, a more human face, as he once put it. We seem to have gone back to the culture of apathy, which became evident in the 60s after the banning of the ANC and the PAC. We vote for our leaders and never hold them accountable, and then we cry foul. We seem to have answers. We seem not to have answers or a way out to the many problems we face. Biko believed that our true liberation was only possible when each one of us were agents of change. The essence of BCM was for each Black person to elevate his own position by positively looking at those value systems that make him or her distinctively a man or woman in society. I am of the opinion for these things to change in this country, we need to reintroduce the concept of Black consciousness in our communities for political, cultural, and social awakening. We need to bring back BCM to reignite the passion in our people and to make sure that the democracy ends up benefiting every one of us in society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pearl. That was resounding. Now let's give an opportunity to Comrade Strike before we engage with your input. If you can unmute, Comrade President.
Yes, you can hear me now. I'm saying thank you very much, Comrade Simpiwe, and to the participants this evening. Let me also greet Sis Pearl, Comrade Pearl. We met when we were very young at Maurice Isaacson High School in 1968 when we go to the school to do Form 1. And at the time, there was no amount or level of politics or conscientization. It caught us when we were in Form 3 in 1969 and 1970 especially. That's when now the students who were third floor were now beginning to become active, and the newspapers were reporting about those activities. Those newspapers you talked about were now writing about students on strike and so on, including the workers in Durban, the Black Allied Workers Union, BAU. And maybe we didn't understand much about what was happening, but they came to our schools, our big brothers, especially after they were banned 1972, remember the Tiro saga and the speech at Terfloor. That's when they came to Morris Isaacson, to Orlando High, to all the high schools in the townships to explain to us what was happening. But Black consciousness and conscientization at the time was now beginning to infuse itself in our society because we envied our bigger brothers who could take the cudgels. Well, because we lived in an oppressive system, we yearned to free ourselves even when we did not have direction. We were not so blind as to ignore the evils that were taking place around us. But we never had a clear solution because we knew very less about the other organizations that were banned in 1960. So we began to participate in the activities, especially of SASM, because we were high school students. So we started sloganeering in SASM, attending seminars and workshops at Welgespreid. And that's where we got to know that the Black consciousness as a philosophy is giving expression to the liberation of our country and to the liberation of our people. And we were encouraged at that point that political organizations in society, in our communities, must find expression in the cultural, in the sporting, in working class, in women. And we moved away and ditched those clubs where we're using ballroom dancing and so on. And we started regarding it as something that was actually not focusing on the liberation of our people. But it was not that long that we started to hear after 1972 about the pro-Frelimo rally in Durban and people getting arrested. And lots of organizations, cultural groups, and so on, finding expression, finding ways to read poetry. When we were in high school, we were encouraged by our teachers to write poetry, but the kind of poetry we were writing, it was about the weather, it was about the flowers, it was about the clouds, it was just about things that did not have any bearing whatsoever on the situation we're living under. But with this politicization, with this conscientization, we began to start writing and reciting that poetry. The other things that we used to recite, we just teach them. And I just want to remind and remember what used to happen. Regina Mundi with Imapele Madimwani reciting a very vibrant political poetry, and a lot of young people started to buy into this. And before long, with Tiro coming to Morris Isaacson, where we were students, giving us explanations at what was happening at Terfloor, and also giving us the right history, because we were given the history that was epitomizing and escalating the Britain and the other people who were oppressing us. Then started to look at the history of liberating Black people. I remember young students like Tsietsi Masheneng. Remember that young boy who used to call himself Donald and running around there as Don Masheneni, speaking in American accent. But with the politicization, he changed completely. Went to Naledi High School and found Bo Sydney Siathulo, who then later on, after conscientization, became Khotso Siathulo. And lots of students began to use their African names, which had been rejected from the time when you go to primary school and you are told to register your English name or your Christian name. This time around, a lot of young students, young people started to use their African names that were given by their mothers, and that went a long way until 1976, when all hell broke loose. But what helped was the SASO BPC trial, where we used to go and draw inspiration. And, those 9 SASO trialists, not a single one of them used their English names. And it was a spectacle. Really, really, really good thing for us young people. 1977, after 76, I had already left the country myself in 1976. But we were very close to what was happening inside the country through the newspapers, the radios, and so on. And after the death of Steve Biko on the 19th of October, that cold Black Wednesday, when they were banned, not only banned, but people were killed. Lots of people were killed, and people were incarcerated in prison, that things took another dimension. A bleak Wednesday, a cold Wednesday. As the Black consciousness movement, before the staging or advent of AZAPO, we spend every year till today, that every year would celebrate and commemorate this day. But later on, the emphasis was on media. A lot of people today, when you talk about Black Wednesday, they would then want to relegate it to a day when the World, the Weekend World, the Post, and those other journals were banned. And it has been very difficult for us in the political space to bring to the fore the fact that what was actually banned and destroyed was the political organizations that were Black consciousness. SASO, that played such a vital and pivotal role in the liberation and in awakening our people. A vehicle that was used by Steve Biko and his cohorts to make sure that our people are conscientized. The Black People's Convention, which has actually gone to bring together the leaders, even those who belong to the other organizations. Think about the Committee of 10, where you have got the priests, Reverend Nkwe, Bishop Nkwe, Tato Mutlana, other business leaders in the townships to form that organizations, teachers like Mufanyana Mazibogo. That organization was banned as well. So, but what the Black consciousness movement had managed to achieve was to unite and give platform to people like Winnie Mandela, Bontate Mutuping from the PAC, so that they could actually spearhead and give expression to this liberation. And you talked about unity, and it actually is symbolized by these organizations. These organizations were now banned in 1977. Hence, in 1978, a lot of them came together to form the Azanian People's Organization, the same people who were in the leadership of SASO, of of SAZN, of NAYO, of TRIO, of IDAMASA, of Committee of 10, of SSRC, and many other such organizations. They came together to form the Azanian People's Organization. Now, if anybody says to you that AZAPO was not there in 1976, AZAPO was not there in 1972, it was formed in 1978. The answer is yes, because the Black consciousness movement was banned. Now, in the past, when other organizations are banned, they go underground or under the ground. But with the Black consciousness movement, it finds another platform and expression in the Azanian People's Organizations, and these leaders could be seen. But there were also others who betrayed this cause, who got attracted by the other organizations. And I dare say, anybody who is in our age group and who was active around 1972, 73, 74, 76, 77, belonged to the Black consciousness movement, was influenced, was mobilized, was conscientized by this movement. And there was very few people who would say they understood the other expressions or the other ideologies which came later. But a lot of the leaders of that age belonged to the Black consciousness. And lo and behold, later on, these are the people who I refer to as having betrayed Stephen Bantu Biko, because they just dumped the cause of pursuing and pushing Black consciousness. In exile, the people who were in the leadership of some of these organizations inside the country and who were forced to leave the country in 1976, 77, and so on, continued with those organizations as their representatives. And in 1980, a conference was organized in London, in Brixton, on the 8th to the 12th of April 1980. These organizations came together to form an external wing of the Black consciousness movement, the BCMA, Black Consciousness Movement of Azania, which was operating in exile. So you can understand, you can see that this Black consciousness went further than just operating inside the country. But it also went on with Tiro to mobilize and get support from countries like Lesotho, Swaziland, Botswana, Zimbabwe. There are people who would then testify as having worked with the likes, with Onkgopotse Tiro, Herine Ngwekulu, to some extent Bani Pichan, and so on. So this Black consciousness, it actually moved beyond the confines of the country, South Africa, what we want to call Azania, and started finding expression. I remember a professor from Ghana who had come to Botswana, and we were in a meeting, and somebody wanted to know, what is this Black consciousness movement? Why Black consciousness movement? And the professor said, it is what Africa wants. Because Africa, even when it is free, it lacks the mental liberation for people to know who they are, for people to assert themselves, for people to feel that they have to take things on their own. And this is what we need as an African society. So now you say in 1994, everybody put down the tools and said, we have arrived. We don't need any politicization. And we also on our side lacked a little bit to continue to push and pursue Black consciousness. And this is the price we are paying today as this country. The many evils that are visiting our leaders, visiting our communities, our country, is due to the lack of politicization and conscientization. We were not even ready to defend ourselves when we were attacked because we didn't know how to fight another Black brother. The only thing we knew about Black brothers is to work with them in order to liberate. That's why we said we gave them the platform. We were with them in the trenches, we were with them in prison, we were with them in exile. And all the time we're doing that, we're making sure that the interest is for the liberation of our country. Some of these people went abroad to go and do military training in other countries. Those of us who remained in Botswana, we mastered the art of entering the country and going back into Swaziland, in Botswana, Lesotho. And when they came, they could not do it, despite the training. So they depended so much on us to help them to infiltrate and get into the country. And that is the spirit we're actually embracing and engulfing, because everything is worked towards the liberation of our country. And when they started attacking us, it became very difficult. And I think it broke the back of many of our leaders. Many of the people who were in the forefront started sitting back, and that in some ways cost us dearly as the Black consciousness movement. I agree, or I cannot agree with you more when you said for us and for this country to get somewhere where we want to take it to take it to the direction that Steve Biko wanted to take it to, we need Black consciousness. But we can only have that Black consciousness because a lot of us are now knocking on the 70s, who were young people at the time. It might just be difficult for us to continue to push the message. What is important is for us to get young people in high school, universities, in the streets of our communities, and preach to them Black consciousness, the same way as it was preached to us in Welgespreid. People like Harry, Tatepeto, Stephen Bantubiko, and many others, they gathered us in the workshops and they taught us and conscientized us with Black consciousness. I think with the time that is still left with us, working with our other younger comrades, the challenge is for us to impart and leave a legacy that conscientizes and politicizes young people to be Black consciousness. Thank you very much, Comrade Simpe.
Thank you, Comrade President Strike-Tukan and Comrade Pelutuli, for your reflections, and great reflections indeed on the day that is called by others Black Wednesday, and we call it the Black Solidarity Day. And there is a reason why we call it Black Solidarity Day, largely because this movement was able to galvanize, the whole country and all sectors of society, through Black consciousness as a force, a uniting force that pushed, the levers of our struggle. What I want to know from you, Sis Pearl, is why was it necessary for Jimmy Kruger to want to ban the newspapers that you were working for when there were a proliferation of newspapers and other media houses in the country? Why did they choose the World and the Weekend World, to ban? Why was it significant for the system to want those newspapers to be banned?
The World and the Weekend World were actually the only Black newspapers, or newspapers that were white-owned but aimed at purely a Black audience. So even the journalists in those newspapers were Black, and the difference is the management was white, and we had mostly white sub-editors, but we had Black editors at the World and Weekend World. But more than anything, most of us, or most of the journalists that worked for the World and Weekend World were part of the Union of Black Journalists. They were part of the Black consciousness movement. And besides that, they were part of different other political organizations. And of course, you know that the Jimmy Kruger and his boys knew exactly what was going on. Whenever we met, we had different organizations or cultural organizations that where we were singing, where we were sharing poetry, where we were talking pure politics and how to change the cause of the Black people in this country. So yeah, I think because the World and the Weekend World had highly politicized people, and in fact, by the way, the day they banned the World and Weekend World, they also took Percy Koboza and other journalists from the World.
Well, Comrade President, here we are, this movement of Biko, with its leadership decimated through prison, and some are killed. We have seen the work that was done by the Black consciousness movement leading up to the 1974 Frelimo rally. And we had seen a lot of the leadership of the Black consciousness movement imprisoned. And we had seen Biko dying at the hands of the white racist regime. The Black consciousness movement's leadership is decimated. And yet Jimmy Kruger still decides to ban, all of the organizations that were associated and linked to Black consciousness. Why do you think it was necessary for Jimmy Kruger to ban, this movement? And what was the significance, and how was it received by the Black consciousness movement in exile, or by those of you who were already outside the country?
Maybe let me start by saying the banning order was a tool that was used by the regime then. The banning orders of individuals used to take place. You remember that within the Black consciousness movement, they had banned the SASO PPC leaders, and some of them left for exile. People like Herine Ngwekulu, people like Bani Pichane, people like Pokwe Mafuna, those were banned. But as we were growing up, we also got to know that there were some old men and women who were much elderly, who were told that they are house arrested for their political activity. And we had learned that the organizations like the ANC and the PAC in the 1960s, they were also banned. So it moved from Kruger, moved from just banning individuals who were seen to be a poison to society. But the movements themselves were a vehicle of producing new and newer leaders all the time, because banning this individual like George Wauchope does not stop political activity to take place. Steve was banned, and he was killed in September, on September 12th. And the death of Biko, it caused such a stir in the country. It's just similar to that of Tiro. After Tiro was killed in the manner in which he was, and because they also had to leave for Botswana because they were also on the track to try and slap with a banning order. Things could not be the same in the country, and the organizations became platforms for young people or political people, activists, to express themselves. Now, I think that Kruger had succeeded in his own mind to bend the ANC and the PAC, and nothing happened for 10 years. And he was happy with the fact that he has silenced them. Now, he was going to do the same thing to the Black consciousness movements, organizations. He was going to bend them, and for the next 10 to 20 or so many years, it was going to be quiet in his own calculation. But unfortunately, things did not happen that way. In 1978, just the next year, AZAPO was formed. The 76 activities had so much radicalized society and young people to such an extent that the process of fighting for liberation was now irreversible. And he must have gotten very frustrated, because what happened between 1960 up to 68 did not happen between 1977 and 78. Immediately, new organizations sprang up and continue with the idea of pushing Black consciousness and liberating Black consciousness. So I think his intelligence thought that just ban them and that's the end. But it didn't, it radicalized young people instead. And when you get banned, you go into exile. You go into exile to go and organize to come back. The next question is, how did it affect us? It was hard. It was terrible. I think just even before we go to the organization, just the death of Biko in 1977 made a lot of those of us who are young people in exile to resolve to free our country. And remember that when we left the country, we told those we talked to that it won't take 5 years. Within 5 years, we'd be back. For my part, had I known that it will take 20 years, I wouldn't have gone. But I went because it was going to be a few years and our country is liberated. But it took much longer. But we learned in that process. I think that process at that time helped us to get to know what it means to want to be free. What sacrifices should be paid? Yes, should be made in order for us to be free. And also to understand what is it that we're doing. A lot of us did not know what is it that we're doing. We wanted liberation, but we did not know how and how to go about it. But we were able to get guidance from those who were even senior. People like Comrade Mangena had been to Robben Island. They had had time to sit in prison and discuss these things and to think about these things without any disturbance that you get during when you are still outside prison and moving around, even when you are in exile, moving around. But in prison, the only time that you have is just to agonize about these things, to plan, to think deeply about these things. And I think when they came out, they also assisted us. They were also banned, but they then decided, no, we're not going to stay here. He came out, and that has actually helped to steer in the right direction the liberation agenda. So that's what I think.
No, thanks. Thanks for that reflection, Comrade President. And Comrade Pearl, you grew up at a time when Black was beautiful. And I don't know when did that change. We live in a world where Zulu is now beautiful. Xhosa is now beautiful. It's no longer Black is beautiful. How did it happen that people who loved themselves as Black people and were seeing themselves as mirrors of Blackness? What happened to that Blackness that so engulfed the nation so much that it enabled the whole society to be Black and to see Black and to reflect Black and to live Black? How is it possible that within a period of 5 or so years beyond the banning of the Black consciousness movement, these people who saw themselves Black, who lived Black, and who analyzed society Black, all of a sudden see a rainbow in that Blackness?
Tough question. And I also still want to know what happened, because we see in acknowledging who we are and where we come from as tribes, we do away with what was very important, what brought us together as a people, the Blackness. And my other question is, when did we stop being Black as coloreds, Indians, and Africans? Why do we now talk about being colored and being Indian and being African? During the time, I remember strike when we had our matric dance at Mufulo Hall. The one thing that we did as SASM, we printed T-shirts with a fist, which was a face of a Black person, an Indian person, and a colored. And we wore those T-shirts under our clothes. And when the time came and we marched to Ayetu Cinema, we took off the tops and ended up with our T-shirts with that face of Black, colored, and Indian, which represented Black in our country. And of course, we were beaten up by the police and they set their dogs on us. But the message had gone through. We were Black and conscious of who we were. And so, my brother, I can't answer that. And it bothers me all the time. It bothers me when I sit, and I was born and brought up in Johannesburg. Yes, I am Zulu, but I can't be free as a Zulu in KZN because I come from Joburg. You know, my mother is Xhosa. I can't go to Eastern Cape and do whatever I wish to do because I am not from the Eastern Cape. That's what has happened to us. And that's why I really believe we need the Black consciousness movement back again.
And maybe the president will help us understand this, because it is something that I have, been pondering about for a very long time. What is it? Or is it that, the Boers succeeded in decimating the Black consciousness movement? Did we really recover, Comrade President?
To Comrade Pell, the answer is simple. The ANC happened. That's as simple as that. And a lot of those people who were part of us and they joined them, they were discouraged from talking about Black. Remember, they brought in the Freedom Charter that actually emphasizes till today that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, both Black and white. They will not leave that at the end. And the program for the Freedom Charter was to try and please the white masters within their ranks and within their communities to such an extent that they are prepared to kill those who are Black consciousness. A lot of our young comrades who went into Angola, in Zambia, to some extent Tanzania, some of them were killed for just raising a clenched fist and talking about Biko. So this was a program, and in 1994, remember what happened between in the 80s, the so-called Black on Black violence. It was a program to exclude and to destroy Black consciousness activists. So I would say to you, Comrade Simpiwe, that it was easy for society in 1976 to run in the streets. Young people said, Black power, as they were running around demonstrating. And I know that somebody in exile in the ranks of the ANC had to apologize for the behavior of these young people in South Africa, for espousing Blackness and relegating it to something that they said it was racism. But the liberal whites, or the white people themselves, were not sleeping because they realized that Black people are mobilizing each other. So they use whatever resources they had to also instigate against us and pick one organization that becomes the darling organization over us. And slowly, when you are Black, you are not good as a young lady, you must be a yellow bone today. Then when they say yellow bone, then you are deafing. We fought, and through Steve and the Black Consciousness movement, against using those creams, I'll call them creams, in the faces of our mothers and sisters to try and destroy the melanin, the black thing that God has given them, so that they can become closer to whitey and the hairstyles and so on. And Black consciousness movement during those years succeeded in discouraging people from doing those kind of self-destruction. And people became proud of who they are, proud of their blackness, proud of their hair, proud of their big nose and the expression, the way they speak English. They became proud of doing that. But then when later on things got the other party to dominate, people are back now at, I don't know, today, I don't know what is that thing. Today, a person can go to bed being like me, black and swart. And the following day, this person can be white. I don't know what they swallow, what they drink, or what they do with the injection, but, and everybody is going in there. It's really embarrassing, disappointing. And then the hair. That you get a girlfriend, young people who is natural, and then you say, let's go out for a party or something, then they come with that hair. So you can see that it now takes us back to way beyond the period of the Black consciousness. And it's a battle, it's a struggle to try and bring them in to accept themselves to who they are. And it's something that we need to work at.
No, thanks, Comrade President. I am in conversation with the president of the Azanian People's Organization, Comrade Strike Tukwane, and Sis Pearl Lutuli, a veteran journalist and media business executive. You are more than welcome to enter the conversation by raising your hand and make your contribution by way of a question or a comment, or you also can contribute to the conversation through the Q&A tab and the chat, as well as drop your comments and issues on our Facebook platform as we engage in this conversation. I see two hands already, the hand of Comrade Matabata and Comrade Hokong. Maybe we will start with Matabata and then Comrade Hokong. You are on the platform. If you can unmute and make your contribution. Comrade Matabata, unmute and make your contribution. All right, let's move on and allow Comrade Hokong to make his contribution. If you can unmute.
Hello, thank you. Just two comments, adding to what Pearl and Strike said on what the reasons may have been for the banning of the organizations. I think it is important to mention that the World newspaper was very sympathetic to what the BC organizations were doing, to the extent that when the UBCs collapsed, and the BPC decided that a vacuum around administration of our affairs at local level should not be allowed. A decision was made to form what was later called the Committee of 10. Now the BPC went to the world offices, asked to see the editor, Percy Goboza, and asked that he give us a venue to hold that meeting and invite Black leaders to that meeting. Percy Goboza was very willing to do that. Not only was the first meeting held there, but all subsequent meetings of the Committee of 10 were held at the offices of the World newspaper. The second thing is that after the BPC had convened that meeting of 14 Black organizations at Hammanskraal in June 77 to oppose Mangope's independence, a decision was made, or a resolution was passed at that meeting, that an open letter be written to Mangope, telling him about his wayward ways of wanting to further balkanize our country after Matanzima had opted for independence in 76. The letter was written, sent to Mangope, then distributed among the media. The Sowetan did not report on the letter. They published that letter in its entirety. Goboza was first summoned to the office of Jimmy Kruger and harangued. Kruger was in the company of his commissioner of police, Prince. After that, he was summoned to the office of John Foster, the Prime Minister, where Foster told him that he was displeased with Goboza's decision to publish, as he put it, that threatening and intimidating letter in its entirety. So they were incensed. And they must have seen the offices of the World newspaper as an activity hub of the BCM as well. Remember that SASO had been instrumental in the founding of the Union of Black Journalists. Now, with regard to the Black organizations, I don't know, I often debate with myself and ask if indeed our organizations would have been banned if Steve Biko had not been murdered. In our travels in the country, we got to learn that the Bureau for State Security under Hendrik van der Berg had expressed displeasure at the BPC's campaign to sabotage the independence of Bophuthatswana. And because they had no arresting powers as an intelligence organization, they had recommended to the Prime Minister to inform the special branch, the security police, to detain Black activists before that December date when Mangope would be getting his independence. But then after this advice to Foster came the murder of Biko and the messy manner in which they handled that incident. In one's view, the banning of BC organizations was the only alternative that they had at that moment. They had to shut down this voice. If you remember when Kruger was asked where criminality started, he said, everything that involves BC is criminal. Where BC starts, criminality starts. Thank you, Kong.
Thank you, Tate Khokong. I see Comrade Keke.
Thank you, Comrade Simpiwe. Thank you, Comrade President. Thank you, Comrade Per. Mine would be, I was touched by Comrade Per's T-shirt of SASM with the feast, with the face of Black people, so-called Indian, so-called colored, and African people. Now, the question was, why are we no longer Black? It wasn't answered here, but I think we know why we are no longer Black. Before I say so, before I answer it, but I must just say here, add something. That man called Jimmy Kruger, in one of the Transvaal meetings or congresses of the National Party, once defined Black consciousness as a white hocha. He called it Black consciousness is a white hocha. In other words, it's something meant to intimidate, cause fear among white people. So there was a passion and a drive to remove Black consciousness because it's an anti-white something. They found within us those who are sympathetic to white people. And throughout, up to now, the bannings and post-bannings 80s, anybody who was saying Black and white was more popular than Black consciousness. And I think that was intentional. But the black consciousness, or the Black as we define it, was further killed more when the ANC was unbanned, because the ANC then, towards the negotiations, mobilized for the new South Africa along the very lines that we had removed and caused solidarity. It revived the Transvaal Natal Indian Congress. It revived so-called colored people along the race. So the ANC effectively killed that Black as defined by Black consciousness, that of the oppressed people being the African people, the so-called colored and the so-called Indians. That program removed the term Black. So with time, so-called Indians and so-called colored people found themselves comfortable to define themselves in ways that in the past were derogatory. It is that program that made us to lose the definition, the proper definition of Black. Even today, when people speak, they speak of Black as and assign it to the African people. But Black, in terms of Black consciousness, is a political term. It involves us as a group who were oppressed by one group, which is white. So I think that's the answer. That's what caused the disappearance and the elimination of Black in the Black community. So the onus is on Black consciousness to rise again, and do the correct thing, the political work that it did before that, so that we are all Black and we all march towards the same goal and the same objective that in the 70s we set to achieve. I thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Keke. Comrade Mashabela.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Simpiwe, Comrade President and CISPEL. Yeah, I just want to speak to this question of why people now see themselves as a beautiful Xhosa, beautiful Zulu. You know, this thing has to do with what has happened to the media. Right. Earlier on in the 70s and maybe a little bit of the 80s, the narrative of Blackness was carried in the media, mostly the Black press, as defined by Black journalists. But then as time went on, I think journalists who were Black in orientation were gradually moved out of the newspapers' spheres of influence. And then what happened was that the Black narrative was no longer spoken in the press. And then later on, the liberal press came up with these things of, when they define the type of shirt that Comrade Simpiwe is wearing, they'd call it an ethnic shirt. And then that's where they started going to they're popularizing this thing of beautiful as a Xhosa, beautiful as a Zulu. And that's where we lost it. But if you go back to and look at the pictures of the Viva Frelimo rally at Carisfontein, you will see that, almost half of the Black people there were people who were so-called Indians at that Carisfontein rally. So that, this thing of Black solidarity has been systematically worked out of Black people over a long period, especially using the collaboration of the liberal-owned media. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for those inputs. And, Comrade Strike, what I want to know is really very simple. In the 70s, Black consciousness was all over society. All spheres of life were, of Black consciousness. And there was this solidarity amongst Black people. And Black consciousness was the only philosophy or ideology that was prevalent and permeating society. And it was, said to be a very strong philosophy. And we still believe Black consciousness to be a very strong philosophy that can survive on its own. Why is it that Black consciousness has not been able to survive in a multi-party situation, in a multi-party society where it is now enabled to compete with other, orientation or political, thoughts and orientations? Because when it was alone, it was surviving and it was influencing society. All sectors of Black consciousness. And all of a sudden, when we find ourselves, your response earlier to my question was, ANC happened. So what? If ANC happens, does it mean that Black consciousness cannot survive ANC? Or do we not believe in the strength of this philosophy to be able to rise and ride over, the ANC influence in society? So why is it that Black consciousness cannot be able to survive, the onslaught of, the existence of other, orientations in the country? That is one thing I want you to unpack for me. The second thing that I want to understand, Sispel, is the narrative that if you look around the newspapers, you listen to the television and you listen to the news stories, and all you find is an anti-Black narrative. And the reason that or the answer that you are given to why that is so is that, the media is white owned. And in your input earlier on, you indicated that the media was white owned. And yet you as journalists and as Black journalists understood and accepted your Blackness and resisted the temptation of kowtowing to the interests of white control. Why is it that Black journalists who occupy media houses right now cannot find it necessary to be Black and push a Black narrative in a society that drives rainbowism, which is undefined? Nobody can define that thing. Nobody can say, you know, this is the vision that comes with rainbowism. We can't understand it. And as a result, you see the country deteriorating, you know, into an abyss. We see every day our country, you know, going deeper and deeper into moral bankruptcy because Black consciousness is not there. And here is a comment from Facebook. Sompis writes here, we see every day that our country is sinking deeper and deeper into moral bankruptcy because of the institutionalization of unethical and visionless leadership. You know, can the president and Mampel please share their thoughts on how we can use Black consciousness to inspire an alternative political vision that will put our country on a totally new socio-economic path? So there is a dire need, you know, for Black consciousness to answer for itself why, if it is strong enough, it cannot change the course of this country. Spell and then Comrade Strike.
I really believe that it is because in everything we do right now, as you said, there is no underpinning philosophy. There is no ideology that guides journalists, that guides society as a whole today. During our days, most of us, like Comrade Strike said, we were actually conscientized and made to see what it means to value Blackness, to value the next Black person, to value yourself as a person. You know, and we were taught to think in a certain way, and that certain way was thinking Blackness. And right now, there aren't enough platforms where journalists who actually are the ones who are able to educate and inform society don't have their own organizations. They don't have organizations that emphasize on any particular philosophy or ideology. We lack so much. We have accepted the idea of being equal, but we are really not equal. We are, in fact, my thing right now is, I keep saying the bureaucracy of the past, which was white, is now replaced by our own Black people. We literally have Black on Black violence on a daily basis. How we attack each other, how we undermine each other, how we block each other from getting positions. There's just so much that emphasizes the difference in us, partisan differences, color differences, groups like, you know, you are Venda, you are Zulu, there's just too much of it. But there is nothing that helps underpin society, that help us find each other as a people.
Thanks, Isabel, President.
No, let me just give a thought that says, when Black consciousness was introduced to our society in 1969, 68, 69, the early 70s, it had found a political vacuum. From 1960 early to 60 something, it was just quiet on a political level. There could have been things happening somewhere, but on the larger scale, it was just very, very quiet. And when Black consciousness was introduced, it found fresh ground. It found empty heads that was just waiting to be filled. But it just did not happen automatically. Work had to be done. I always remember this expression from Stephen Bantu Biko when he wrote letters to the SRCs at universities and talking to students that you can never be a spectator of the game you are supposed to be playing, and inviting these leaders or these young people to become activists of the Black consciousness. Formation schools, workshops were held all over the country. Those who joined AZAPO and the Black consciousness movement much earlier will remember that they were underpinned by political discussions. And even up to today, you still come across people who say, hey, we want to start something. Where is the material? When they say material, they are referring to the program of reading, writing, educating in welfare spread. Bigger brothers from universities would come there and lecture about Black consciousness, explain to young people what is Black consciousness. Then it went to the rural areas, Comrade Simpio. You could see in Limpopo people sitting under a tree being lectured by Tabor Munchani, Don Nkadimeng, and Koluma Shabele, and the other people who were already in the Black consciousness movement. After Tiro was banned, a meeting was held at universities, and a resolve was taken that let us go to the high schools to go and interact and conscientize our younger people. And they came to the gates of Orlando High of Maurice Isaacson. That's why those T-shirts of farewell function, because before that time, the farewell function was a suit and a tie and a white shirt, but it changed to become a T-shirt. So I'm saying, first, there was no contending ideology. There was no competing for that space. It was just open, and the Black consciousness moved into that space. But we also moved into that space with a firm conviction and belief of the ideology we were preaching. It was not just going to say something about what you've read. It was actually something that you must live as we define Black consciousness. Now, moving forward, later on, contending ideologies coming into being. And of course, there was a tussle for that. There was standing your own ground. Until these people decided, no, let's just kill them. and burn their houses and brutalize them. And I think that's where, to a very large extent, a disturbance came. But when you believe in something, it should continue even with that. Because remember, when you were taken to prison, you're a big town. People went to prison, and when they came out, they were heroes. So if they detain you, society looks at you as somebody who lives for something, who has got values, and you also come out with your shoulders high and your chest out because you are being persecuted for being in the struggle by the enemy. But when your own people started to persecute you, it became a very different ball game. It's something that we never countenanced. It's something that we never were prepared for. And that worked right into the 1994, and people were in Christmas. Comrade Mangana says, when people are celebrating and you try to preach to them, they don't listen. Wait until they've been clobbered by the liquor and fighting each other. Then they are sober. Then they want to know, what is it that you are saying? So it is that expression that people arrived, and a lot of people who were seen as political leaders are the ones who actually, and I spoke about betrayal earlier on, and selling out on the position that went to the other side. So that's why I was saying the ANC happened. But that should not actually stop us from doing what we believe in. When last did any of us attend a political workshop, a discussion? When last did any of us go and participate in an activity that espouses Black consciousness to the community? We have become like them, who want to go to our people when we are going to ask for the votes. But this thing, we can change it. We can change it. We can start small. And a 12-year-old today is not young not to be conscientized, because they are being given other poisons at that age. The debate throughout the day, yesterday and today, the parents are up in arms. Our children cannot just be independent in deciding to vaccinate. The parents are saying, no, they must get our consent. But somebody says, no, but they have got the rights to abort and to be doing the other things. So if they can understand those things, I think it will be easy for them when we sit down with them and explain this Black consciousness. But it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be a piece of cake, because even when you talk to young people today, they want to know, what is it that you're going to do for me? And we say, it's not for you, it's for society at large. So this thing has got to start somewhere, and then it can be built to go. Comrade Mangana says we can fix ourselves. Indeed, we can. Let's go back there to go and do political work, starting small. We should not start very big, starting small and then build from there going forward.
No, thank you. Thank you, President. Comrade Nkoke Murufane is saying, occupied Tanzania is banning and on the verge of collapse. Most of us know and understand the role Velgaspreid Training Center played in the shaping of Black consciousness activists. We also know what killed the BC philosophy. I think it is about time that AZAPO establishes similar structures and institutions to advance the teachings of Black consciousness philosophy. The country can only be saved by BC values. Nkululin Hlapo says, now that we have won political power, we need Black consciousness as a tool of analysis to define current circumstances we find ourselves in, and as an ideology to advance interests of Blacks and tackle day-to-day challenges. It espouses Ubuntu and selflessness. We need selfless leaders. Laiti Yan is asking the question, what is Black consciousness saying to the state of corruption done by Black leaders diverting money meant for improvement of Blacks' living conditions? So those are some of the comments on the chat platform. What I want as we close off, you to comment on is really whether Black solidarity is possible under the present circumstances. And if so, what is to be done? Sispel, as you close.
The first thing I'd like to say is that Black consciousness can work in our country, but we need leaders. You know, the Steve Biko and Mampila and Serge Cooper and all that gang literally made sure that they go out into the country and educate everybody else and conscientize everybody else about being Black. Now, the difference today is that everybody who is going to the people, they are looking for votes. Our leaders are more about getting something out of talking to the people. It's not about politicizing and conscientizing people for the sake of a better life for all of us. And I want to say that the only way it can change is when we have leaders that are not interested in positions of power, or especially positions that are linked to money, because that's what has totally messed us up in this country. You know, we literally have people who come from never earning a penny because they were in exile, and they end up being in positions of power, and they're earning so much money. And the more they get is the more they want. And they have forgotten the cause. They have forgotten that they are in those positions because they have to improve the lives of the people.
Thank you, Sispel. Sompisi, you want to comment on Black consciousness and youth?
Yes, I wish I could activate my camera because I wanted to share something with Comrade President and Auspel. You know, I wanted them to see something, which is going to inform what I'm going to say. I won't waste much time.
Okay. Do that, Sompisi, if you're able to.
I'm trying to see here.
Okay, let me help you. That's fine. All right, you should be able to now. So in case you are muted.
Mute. I think I'm clear now.
Yeah, I can see you.
All right. Okay, so thank you first for the very enlightening input, Mampel and Comrade President Astringo. You know, those reminders are important. Thank you so much for that. So the point I wish to make is, if you make an internal assessment, of AZAPO in particular, you are likely to come to the conclusion that things are bad and all is lost in terms of Black consciousness. But I am of the view that the AZAPO brand is more powerful than we realize, actually, you know, outside AZAPO. And it is something I don't think we often think about. I have a publication here, Comrade President, right? If you look at this publication, it's not an AZAPO publication, right? It's not an AZAPO publication, The Lives of Black Folk. It was released about a month ago. But if you look at the artwork, you know, everything, but also the content of the over 20 articles in here, it is pure Black consciousness written by young people. And it's over 20 articles on various aspects of the Black condition after 1994. What is my point? My point is there are many young people who continue to find Black consciousness and the AZAPO brand attractive. Our job is to organize ourselves and go and get those young people so that we do what Pearl is saying, so that they don't just become conscious for the sake of being conscious. Not all is lost. There are many young people who think this philosophy and this brand AZAPO is relevant. We must just work to go and get them and unearth them. And this publication, which looks like an AZAPO publication, is testimony to the influence of both AZAPO and Black consciousness in society. I just wanted to make that input. Thanks.
Thanks, Sompisi. Comrade President, you can close it off for us.
Yes, thank you very much. Nothing can be wrong with liberating yourselves. I think we must just believe that when you believe that you are not liberated, nothing should be wrong. Everything should be right about doing that, or positive about doing that. So the issue of Black solidarity, it's possible because we have realized with time that nothing that is on the stage now that works for us. Everybody is concerned about the disunity, the corruption, the self-serving, self-aggrandizement, and all the things that are actually taking place in our society. And I think it is up to us, like Comrade Mbele said, to say, out there, young people can see this, the condition under which they live are actually opening their eyes. All they need is someone who can just show them the way, and it is possible. I want to end up by saying the leaders that led before, like Steve Biko, produced Bo Comrade Khokong and maybe Comrade Mangena was at the same level. And they produced Bo Comrade Matata Tsedu, Bo Comrade Pearl, and so on. And the leadership of Bo Comrade Pearl produced the other layer of the leadership, Yabo Comrade Simpiwe, Yabo Comrade Kakema, Yabo Comrade Mbele, and so on. Now that layer, but without moving away, that layer must then cascade downwards also to produce other young people, and we link and hook into each other to make sure that as the older people become older, the younger people can continue to mobilize going downwards. And it is young people who will be able to understand the circumstances under which we live now. And I'm saying this, not giving up, but saying when you are young, the responsibilities of home and so on and so forth are not that holding on and binding to you than when you are older. And for as long, you know, I was in Beckersdale, comrades, over the weekend. And sometimes I go to the Free State, I go to Kaikai. When I was in Beckersdale, the people who were singing there are the same people who were singing 10 years ago. The same people who were singing 10 years ago. They have the oomph, they have but they will not be able to sustain that unless and until there are younger people we don't know. I knew almost everybody in that crowd. But until I get to know, I don't know, find myself that there are people I don't know and they are much younger. I think that way we can survive our organization. So we need to go further down and Mbele, we need to hold places. Okay, technology has helped to be able to, for me to talk here when you are in Cape Town, which has gotten things better. But we need also to touch each other. We also need to touch each other and to live with each other, to organize those Goombas. Pearl is beautiful in our communities, so that this conscientization can happen and the young people will join us. In fact, Comrade Veli says they've already joined us. It's just for us to bring them together. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade Pearl Lutuli and Comrade Strike Tukwane for participating in this conversation. It's lovely. The biggest hurdle confronting Black consciousness is the struggle to conscientize Black people. The easiest struggle is to overthrow the system. In any struggle, we spend most of our time fighting to conscientize those who are oppressed, to enable them to engage in the struggle for their revolution. It's been a great conversation, and it is good that we spend time and reflect on the history of our struggle as it teaches us lessons for the struggle as we move forward. We thank you for participating in this webinar, and we look forward to engaging with you again next Sunday. Thank you and good evening.
No. Singena wamanyamazwe lapho kungazikhona babanyama sandeli kululeko sobashiya bafobeti sangena wamanyamazwe lapho kungazikhona babanyama sandeli kululeko sobashiya kokobeti sangena wamanyamazwe lapho kungazikhona babanyama sandeli kululeko